John Ulzheimer is known as one of our nation's most recognized credit experts. Having worked for 28 years in the credit industry, John has become one of the most prolific speakers about credit and the go-to authority on answers to credit-related questions. Credit Countdown with John Ulzheimer.
Hello, my name is John Ulzheimer and I am a consumer credit expert, and today I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a topic that's actually never really been addressed in a succinct manner, in my opinion, which is why are there so many credit scores available? If you read any article or blog or hear anybody talk about credit scores, they would generally refer to themselves having a score. So, hey, my score is 800. Oh no, your score is 750. And that suggests that you actually have this one credit score that changes over time based on your credit responsibility and your actions that you take vis-a-vis your credit cards and whether you make payments on time. That is an incorrect assumption. You do not have one credit score. You actually have dozens of credit bureau scores, and you actually have hundreds of different types of scores, many that you have probably never heard of and you probably will never see. But let's focus specifically on the scores that people tend to talk about the most, which are the credit bureau-based risk scores. So those credit scores that are built by FICO, those credit scores that are built by VantageScore, the ones that are used by lenders to make lending decisions. So credit bureau risk scores. And what that actually means is that it is a score that is designed to measure your level of credit risk that you pose to a lender. And it is credit bureau based, meaning that it depends or relies on information from your credit reports. And so that's where that phrase comes from, credit bureau based risk scoring system. So let's talk first about VantageScore, because that's the easier one to address. VantageScore, which is a joint venture of the three credit reporting agencies, has been around since 2006. And there are four generations of the VantageScore credit score, VantageScore 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is the same identical model. So if you have identical credit reports across all three of the credit reporting agencies, as unlikely as that is, you will have the same VantageScore 1, the same VantageScore 2, 3, and 4 across the three credit bureaus, right? So, being as hyper accurate as possible, there are only four VantageScore scores because there are only four generations and they are exactly the same. So now that we've identified that there are four VantageScores, let's talk about FICO. This is considerably more complicated. FICO, first off, has been building credit bureau risk scores since meaning they've been commercially available in the United States since 1989. So the first FICO score was, the commercial name was Beacon. And Beacon, it was the FICO score available through Equifax. And so since 1989, there have been multiple versions of the FICO score at Equifax. Shortly after 1989, TRW, many of you probably don't even know what that is. TRW is a credit reporting agency that doesn't exist any longer. The company still exists, but the TRW Credit Services doesn't exist any longer. That data was sold and eventually acquired and is now the company that we commonly know as Experian. And so Experian / TRW has had also multiple versions of the FICO score since the very early 90s. The same with TransUnion. And so you have multiple generations of FICO scores times three credit reporting agencies. They're not all the same. So just because FICO builds a model and installs it at TransUnion and Equifax and Experian doesn't mean it's the same exact model. So really, those are three separate scoring systems. So you have to count those as three. Then on top of that, FICO has these variations of their scoring systems that are called industry options or industry adjusted scores. The inventory of those scores has changed over time. At one time, there was a mortgage version, there was an installment version, there was a personal finance version, there was an auto version, and there was a bank card version, and then there was just the generic base model. So there were 6 variants of their scores. And so for every time that their models were redeveloped, many of those industry adjusted versions were also redeveloped and installed at the three credit reporting agencies. So you can kind of see how this number starts to spin out of control. One scoring brand times three credit reporting agencies times multiple generations plus multiple variants And what you really end up with is you end up with dozens and dozens of scoring models that are out there commercially available. Some of them have been decommissioned because they're so old and they're no longer being used, but a lot of the older ones still are in use, for example, in the mortgage environment. For example, as of the date of this recording, the second version of the score at Experian is the one that's being used in the mortgage environment. And that's not a criticism of Experian, that's not a criticism of FICO, that's just the version that FHFA has mandated that is used in mortgage lending. And so that's why there are so many scoring models, and that is the answer to the question, why do I have so many credit scores? The reason you have so many credit scores is that those models are not all the same. So every time you filter credit bureau data from any of the 3 credit reporting agencies through any of those models, it's going to yield a 3-digit score that's going to fall most of the time between 300 and 850. VantageScore 1 and 2, there's an exception. Their score goes up to the high 900s. But that's the answer to the question as to why you have different scores. And so even though your scores are not going to be the same, that is just simply not going to happen. They should be what's called directionally similar. And that's kind of a techie term. What does that mean in English? What that means in English is if you've got a really, really good credit report, then you're going to have a really, really good credit score regardless of what model, variant, credit bureau, or version of the score is being used to calculate your score. If you have horrible credit, unfortunately the flip side is also true. You're going to have a horrible score, again, regardless of the credit bureau, regardless of the score brand, and regardless of the generation or variant. If you've got modest credit, then you're going to fall kind of in that 600 to 700 range, which is generally considered to be, fair to slightly below average to subprime. And again, your scores are going to be, all over the place within that range, depending on the scoring system. So that's the reason why you have so many scores. There's not a whole lot you can do to control this, meaning that you can't go to a lender and dictate which A, credit bureau they're going to use, and B, which scoring system they're going to use, because we as consumer applicants don't have that level of control. Certainly, if we do some research and we determine, hey, this lender uses Equifax, that lender uses Experian, and this lender over here uses TransUnion, and we know because a lot of these scores are available, and a lot of them are available for free, so we don't have to buy them. We can just look them up depending on the websites where we go. You may know, hey, look, I have the highest score at Equifax, therefore I'm going to apply for credit with lenders who tend to use Equifax. And the same is true for Experian, and the same is true for TransUnion. And so even though you have so many scores, don't look at this as being a negative thing. Look at it kind of as being an opportunity to be more strategic with your applications. And if you can find out which bureau is being used by a particular lender for a particular loan product, for a particular geography where you live, then you may be able to kind of be a little bit more, strategic with your applications, and you may end up finding yourself being able to apply at places that are going to see the best of your scores to the extent that you can control that. Most lenders are going to pull one credit report and 1 or 2 scores as part of the underwriting process. They're not going to pull 3 credit reports and 3 scores. The only environment where that is a common practice is the mortgage environment. And then really there's nowhere for you to hide. If you've got 1 lousy score and 2 okay scores, the lender is going to see all of them and it's going to consider all of them. But generally speaking, the lender is just going to pull 1. So to the extent you can become more familiar with your kind of inventory of scores, then you can be a little bit more strategic and smarter with your shopping. So that's it. That's why you have so many scores. So the takeaway from this is don't go walking around telling people what your score is unless you're going to tell them that you've got a lot of different scores. But generally speaking, you tend to score, pretty good or pretty poorly or kind of average. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great rest of your day.
For more videos and credit tips from John Ulzheimer, go to www.tradelinesupply.com.